Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good night. It is episode 5 of the Double Header podcast. As always, I am your host, Mahal. And today, we got a mix of soccer and baseball. Obviously, baseball offseason. We missed a week last week to celebrate Thanksgiving, but there were some moves that happened, and we haven't had a shot to talk about them. So we got a few free agent moves to update our free agent predictions and to talk about. We've also got a few trades to talk about. And tomorrow, December 5th, is the FIFA World Cup 2026 group draw. So we will simulate our own draw of the group stage before being able to talk about the actual draw next week. But that'll be in the later half of this episode. To begin, let's talk about MLB free agents first and foremost. Before we get into who has signed since we last talked and who hasn't, let's just talk about some predictions. We are now 4 for 7, so 4-3 overall. The 4 correct include Gleyber Torres, Josh Naylor, Shota Imanaga, and the newest addition, Ryan Helsley to the Baltimore Orioles. A shot out of left field has gotten us correct. So, the additions we got to talk about, the big ones are the guy I just mentioned, Ryan Helsley, Emilio Pagan, Dylan Cease, and Devin Williams. Those are the big additions that have happened since we last talked. There were also smaller additions. Cedric Mullins, Tampa Bay Rays center fielder, played for Baltimore Orioles for much of his career before going to New York and playing in Queens after the deadline this last year. Alek Manoah finds his perfect match in the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Jake Fraley remains a Tampa Bay Ray. Ryan Yarbrough remains a New York Yankee. Phil Maton goes to the Chicago Cubs. Raisel Iglesias stays an Atlanta Brave. And Cody Ponce, who dominated the KBO last season, comes back to Major League Baseball and signs a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Toronto Blue Jays, who also made another splash, and they acquired Dylan Cease. Gave him a 7-year deal worth $210 million, averaging $30 million a year, a fat contract for Cease. That said, there are deferrals, bringing that total a year for when he's on the team to roughly $26.5 million, making it a much more reasonable deal for the Toronto Blue Jays. And you have to respect the Blue Jays for going after what they need to. They were in the World Series. They were 2 outs away from winning the World Series over those dominant Dodgers that everyone talks about. They almost had it, if not for Miggy Rojas, with the clutchest moment of his career in a game-tying home run in Game 7 of the World Series in the 9th inning. Toronto Blue Jays were going to be world champions. They add now Dylan Cease to the fold, who might help them if they lose Bo Bichette and if George Springer falls down from what was a resurgent 2025 season, and if Vladdy isn't the same guy, and Addison Barger, Cody Clement aren't the same guys that they were in 2025, which I don't expect them to be. But when you have an outlier year from a lot of guys, what you have to do to make up for some regression is go and sign guys. And Dylan Cease is a guy. This is a guy that is an elite strikeout pitcher, struggles with walks a little bit, gives up some runs, had an ERA in the 4s this past year, but is a solid 2 or 3 in a rotation. And that's where he'll slot in for the Blue Jays. You can't expect him to be an ace, and they're paying him almost ace money. Not necessarily ace money, but 1 in your rotation type of money, paying him $30 million a year. So he's got to be good, but he's fallen off a little bit each and every year of his career since he left the White Sox especially. But he still gets a strong amount of strikeouts, which will play for the Blue Jays. And you add him to a rotation that has Kevin Gausman, Trey Savage, an aged Jose Barrios, Shane Bieber for another year, Your 2026 rotation looks pretty strong. And now you have him for 6 years beyond that as well. It's a fun addition for the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays fans should be excited about him and Ponce. And they've got some decent rotation depth. That said, at what point do Cease and Gosman and Barrios already has, but Barrios and Bieber all fall off a cliff being on the wrong side of 30? And Cease isn't quite there yet, still in his late 20s, but he's already begun to fall. What happens when his velocity dips? So it to me, it's a rotation the Blue Jays have that is nervy, and it looks a lot better on paper than I think it might be. But having a good rotation on paper is fun in of itself, and that's a fun addition for them. It now gives you a 3 of him and Gosman or Bieber and Savage in a postseason series, and all 4 of them in a later series. And that in itself is a positive. So good for the Blue Jays for going and getting a guy, and then adding another guy already in Cody Ponce, and they've already spent $40 million a year for the next 3 seasons this offseason without bringing in a bat yet. So they're spending money, but they have more holes to fill. Losing Bo Bichette would be a major piece that they would lose. And that's a lineup that, to me, already, even after losing to them as a Mariners fan in the ALCS, I'm not really scared of that lineup. I'm not scared of George Springer in the year 2026 after, he had a great year in 2025, but to me, that's like, last hurrah type of thing for Springer. I could be wrong about that, of course. But they have one guy in their lineup that truly scares you, in Vladdy. They need another guy, and whether that's Bo Bichette or Kyle Tucker, Cody Bellinger, there are options out there. But now you're spending a lot of money already. But that's never a negative thing, and you have an entire country behind you, so you should spend money, so good for them. Moving on to some relievers. We talked about Ryan Helsley going to Baltimore. Little shot in the dark for myself getting that one right, but 2 years, $28 million for him. You see why the Baltimore Orioles like this. They needed to add to their pitching staff, whether that was the starting rotation or the bullpen. They started with the bullpen. They need to add still to their rotation, but that's a good piece for them to add. Hopefully he can bounce back for their sake, but he's another guy that has continually declined over the course of his career. He's lost some of that strikeout stuff. He's only a 2 or 3 pitch pitcher. So it's a fun addition. But I think for a team that is limited in payroll, $14 million a year to Ryan Helsley is a risky contract. That said, it's only a 2-year deal, and it is something to get yourself excited for if you are an Orioles fan. Devin Williams goes from the Bronx to Queens. I thought he was going to want to get out of New York and get out of the large market, but he gets a 3-year deal worth $51 million, meaning he gets 17 now a year. And that's a fat contract for him, for a guy that struggled a lot in 2025. Now, he was very good at limiting walks, was very good at getting strikeouts. And as a reliever, those are 2 things that if you can do those 2 things, you're probably going to be fairly successful. He was a little bit unlucky, gave up some homers, which in Yankee Stadium is going to happen. But, you go to Citi Field now, and it's probably a nicer ballpark for you as a pitcher. It's a little bit softer of a landing going in Queens than the Bronx, as anywhere would be compared to the Yankees and the Bronx. But it's not an easy landing by, any means. And especially getting $17 million a year. And if they can't re-sign Edwin Diaz, you're expected to be the guy in that bullpen. So there is some, stress for him to be that guy. But I have all the faith in the world that Devin Williams is going to be that guy, and that's the reason that so many teams were in on him and wanted him. They wanted him to be a reliever, a back-end reliever for them, and he gets to go to New York, where if Edwin Diaz doesn't return, he's now the closer there. Which, should he be starting as a closer right now? You don't know, because you don't know what he's going to look like. But he got to a point where the Yankees really felt like they couldn't use him in the 9th inning later in the year. But you look at his years with Milwaukee, he was a very, very, very good reliever. He was an all-star a couple of years ago. So again, I think this is a good signing for the Mets. And for a team that never is limited by payroll, you're able to go give him $3-4 million more a year than maybe another team was willing to give him. And for the Mets, I think this is a good move. Moving on to some MLB trades that happened. The big two that happened that we got to talk about are Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien. This was a weird one. The money was evened out between the two. It was a swap really between bad contracts. Texas acquires Nimmo, who is less money per year, but more money overall in a longer contract. Whereas the Mets acquire Semien, shorter contract, more a year. They also then go even out Nimmo's contract. So the way I'm looking at it, right, is I think both these teams wanted to just switch something up. And the Mets get Marcus Semien, who could bounce back. He's on the wrong side of 30. He's declined each and every year, especially since he got to Texas. But he stays healthy, maybe. You get him into a new ballpark, new organization. Maybe he can tee off and find some of that form that he had when he was with the Blue Jays, or that first couple of years, especially the 2022 season, or 2023 season with Texas when they won the World Series. And Nimmo, still a good defensive or a decent defensive outfielder, a decent hitter. He gives a better bat to Texas probably than Semien was, but they will lose some of that infield defense. They do have some prospects coming up in that sense, so we'll see what it looks like. But it's a type of move to me that just signals both these teams wanted to switch a little something up, and sometimes that's just what you got to do, and both these teams were able to do that. Other trade that happened, Sonny Gray becomes a Boston Red Sox. Red Sox get 3 or 4 starter in their rotation, a guy that has experience, a guy that has pitched for a lot of teams, including the New York Yankees. They give up a couple of younger pitching prospects, one about Major League ready, one a year or two away, but it's a good return for the Cardinals for Sonny Gray, especially with the Cardinals signaling they're probably not going to try and be competitive to the largest extent, and smartly at that in 2026. But the Red Sox, they get a nice little addition to their rotation. I think they probably could still use another pitcher that is truly a 2 in a rotation. But Sonny Gray, he's experienced, he's a veteran, he can bring leadership, and he might be able to improve some of those guys around him just by, this is what I had to do in my career to make myself better. This is what I've learned from some of the guys I've been around, some of the guys I've pitched around. And that in of itself is a valuable piece. That said, Boston taking on a large contract, $21 million a year. So it is an expensive trade for the Red Sox, but they get a nice piece in Sonny Gray for 2026. Moving on, let's talk about the World Cup. It is the big highlight of the 2026 sports calendar. And today we're going to simulate a group stage draw. Obviously, we know U.S., Mexico, Canada are the hosts. That means they are going to be the pot 1 holders for their respective groups, which means they cannot match up with Spain, Argentina, France, England, Brazil, Portugal, the Netherlands, Belgium, or Germany. But there are still a lot of very competitive teams, especially in pot 2, that they could be paired with. So, without further ado, let's simulate this. Okay, so what we've got going on is Mexico, Egypt, Switzerland, and New Zealand in Group A. We're going to go through all these groups, and then we'll predict my outcomes for each of them. Group B, Canada, Scotland, Ecuador, and Bosnia, who will get it through the first path of UEFA. Group C, Germany, Uruguay, that's a big 2 there, Slovakia, and the Ivory Coast. Group D, the United States, get their matchup with Norway, Japan, and Cape Verde. That is another fun group with Japan and Norway in that one. Group E, Brazil is the pot 1 team. They will get Denmark through the D path of UEFA. They'll get Uzbekistan and Austria as well. Group F is Belgium. This is a pretty solid group. Belgium and Morocco. You also get Jordan and Panama in there. Group G, the Netherlands, Algeria, Colombia, and Iraq, who get it through a playoff spot. Group H, Portugal, Haiti, the small country, South Africa, and South Korea. Group I, France, Senegal, Curacao, and Qatar. Group J, Spain, Paraguay, Australia, and Ghana. Group K is where we finally see England, Jamaica, Tunisia, and Iran. Group L sees Lionel Messi face off against Croatia, Poland, and Saudi Arabia. So, from there, let's predict who we think will be the winner of each of these groups. Group A, like I said, Mexico, Egypt, Switzerland, and New Zealand. I think this is going to be a battle between Switzerland, probably, and Mexico. Egypt might be able to get themselves in there. If I were to predict who I think will finish on top, probably Mexico. But I think that would be an entertaining group in of itself, especially because Mexico is pretty even, I think, with Switzerland and Egypt. You see Mo Salah get to face off against Mexico, and Switzerland always a solid club that is well managed, is organized at the back. And they know how to play and get wins. Group B sees other host Canada. They get Scotland, Ecuador, and Bosnia in their group. I think I would probably give Scotland the lead in this group. I would say Scotland probably finishes first, then Canada, then Ecuador, and then Bosnia. Group C sees Germany and Uruguay face off. Slovakia gets it through a playoff spot. The Ivory Coast are also in that group. I think Germany would probably come on top in that group. You'd probably see Uruguay finish second, Slovakia finish third, and the Ivory Coast finish fourth. Group D sees Erling Haaland they host the United States. You also see Japan come across the Pacific for a little World War II battle against the United States. You also see small country of Cape Verde make it in. Cape Verde, I think, would finish in fourth in this group. I would project the United States and Norway to be the two teams that would compete with each other for the first seed in this group. I do think the United States would be able to do so, but Norway, that's a very dangerous team, and that is a worst-case scenario in Pot 3 for the United States. Group E, Brazil, Denmark, Uzbekistan, and Austria. Uzbekistan, I got them finishing last, Austria in third, Denmark in second, and Brazil, I think, would finish first pretty easily in that group. Group F, Belgium, Morocco, Jordan, Panama. It's my first upset, really. I think Morocco will top that group. They would then have Belgium right below them, get Jordan and Panama either which way for those last two seeds. Group G, the Netherlands, Algeria, Colombia, and Iraq. I think the Netherlands pretty easily finish on top there. I think the rest of it could go any which way, though. Group H, Portugal will easily win that over Haiti, South Africa, and South Korea. Group I think France would top that group. They would then have Senegal below them and Curacao and Qatar in any which order below them. Group J, Spain would top this group with Lamine Yamal over Australia, Paraguay, and Ghana. Those three teams I think could go in any which way as well. Group K sees England top the group, and then think you'd probably see Jamaica, Tunisia, and Iran again in any which order between those three teams, depending on who wants to show up the best. Group L would see Argentina top it. I do think you would see Croatia probably below them, with Poland finishing in third and Saudi Arabia finishing last. That's the draw that we have done. The official draw is tomorrow afternoon. We'll get games all announced on Saturday afternoon. But for now, we hope for new and more moves in baseball. We hope for a fun World Cup draw tomorrow. Winter meetings of baseball begin on Sunday and go through Wednesday this upcoming week. So we will talk about all of the news that comes out of that next Thursday. It'll be the winter meetings episode of the Doubleheader Pod. But for today, thank you so much for joining episode 5 of the show. Till next time, thank you all so much for listening, and peace.